So I did a video a few days back and got some people kind of angry in the comments, and just wanted to follow up on it and say if you're not being honest with yourself about the economy, getting angry about it really isn't going to do anybody good, and it's liable to keep you in the same position you're in currently. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, as well as the economy and the markets today as we get further into the video. So stick around and hopefully we have an interesting discussion today. Good morning. My name is Adam Kahn, and I'm the Rational Investor. Today is Thursday, January 25th. Glad to have some sun back out. It actually warmed up. Maybe the rain coming through, pushed us into a little bit better weather here in Vegas. Really nice to see. So, anyway, before I forget, before I talk about the things I wanted to get into, if you guys could do me a favor, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, make some comments, even if you're arguing. I got no problem with it. I'm happy to discuss any of the topic, especially because I know what I'm going to talk about today is a little bit controversial and had some people upset the other day, but I was in the cold and it was snowing and I didn't have a lot of time to get into it because I was chilly and I didn't want to be out in the snow that long. Anyway, the economy is not that bad. I know that the inflation sucks for everybody, and I know people are struggling, and I know things are not as easy as they were before. And full disclosure for me personally, my business, my mortgage business is off more than 50% year over year, and I expect that to continue for a while. But when I think about the economy and life and how things normally are, that is not out of the ordinary. Life is not so simple. When we were kids, we had to make sure to turn the lights off because the electric bill was too high. We couldn't make long distance phone calls because the phone calls were too expensive. It wasn't the way people picture it just because they look back and see that prices were cheaper and think, oh, life must have been so much easier. It wasn't. And I got a comment about how I'm not in touch and I have no idea what people go through. So, same thing. So, you guys know my first job was working at a deli, mopping floors, taking out garbage, wiping the counters down, and cleaning up after people. It is not like it was just this got into a great job day one and things were so simple. I just think I try to be really honest about what's going on in the economy. And when I find myself in a position where I'm stuck, I do my best to talk to people and see what avenues and directions I need to go to put myself where I can make more money. The other thing is, and I know this will get a lot of people upset, is you really don't want higher minimum wage because what I think is higher minimum wage is half of the problem with inflation. If you raise the minimum wage, what ends up happening is everything has to go up in price to account for that. The restaurants, when they're paying their employees the minimum wage, they're counting their what they charge for whatever it is they sell based on those things. So when they have to pay the employees better, they have to raise the prices on the menu. That goes the same way with a hotel, with rent, with anything that you buy. When the minimum wage goes up, that is going to cause inflation. What you really want is better pay for you so that you can live better. But to think that minimum wage is going to make it better, I used to have a conversation with one of the employees. So I owned a restaurant for a little while, which big mistake. If you ever want to talk about that or hear about it, feel free to ask. I'll be happy to talk about the restaurant business. But I remember explaining to one of the employees who I got along with great that raising minimum wage causes inflation. I could tell that she was looking at me as this owner who just didn't want to pay better. Look, if the store made enough, I am so happy to pay better because that means the employees are happier to work, which means I can work on more things like growing the business and not worrying about making a pizza. But if minimum wage itself is raised, I have to raise my prices. And if everything gets more expensive and you get a raise from $10 an hour to $15, I understand the thought process is I can afford more things. But as you've seen, what's happened is you can't afford more things because the price of the things outpace the raise. Now, that's frustrating. I get the thought process. But when you give everybody the raise, that's what happens. And one of the comments I got about that was, no, it's these greedy billionaires. Yeah, a little bit, but they're such a smaller percentage of society. And if you give somebody like Jeff Bezos an extra $50 million, how much more does he spend? It's not like he's going to eat more because now he has more money, or he's not going to start doing more things to push inflation up. He already has enough that it probably makes no difference. But when you give everybody a little bit more, that's going to push inflation more than giving some billionaire more money. I know nobody wants to hear that, and we all want to think, oh, the billionaires make too much, which they do, and they probably don't pay enough in taxes and whatever else. But that's not what's driving inflation as much as when the bottom starts getting pushed higher, because it flows through everything and every expense. The other thing is, the old saying of be careful what you wish for. Really, we don't want to see a recession to drive the pit prices lower. Because if you remember, when you go through those things, there's generally large unemployment. I would rather be working and making less money and having to adjust for that than unemployed with prices falling lower. Unemployed is a big problem. If you have no money coming in, it doesn't matter how much better the prices are getting. That's a bad economy. So while people are sitting here rooting for a housing market crash and rooting for a recession so prices go back to where they are, there's a disconnect of what that would really look like, because if 15% of the people ended up getting out of losing their jobs because of this recession, that's a lot of people who can't afford to pay these lower rents and everything else. So it seems like everybody thinks, I'll be able to keep my job. I'll get the higher pay that I've gotten as the economy's boomed and the inflation has come through. But there'll be this wonderful recession that's going to lower prices and make life easier. I don't think that's how recessions work. Like, before you wish for these terrible things, when the billionaires lose their money, they usually let people go. The one concern is as AI is growing, the big companies like Google and Amazon and them, they're talking about letting more and more people go, and we're talking in the tens of thousands. That could cause the slowdown to start slowing a bit more, which could cause a nice balance of both things, because those are high earners that probably are going to be able to find new jobs even if it's at a discounted pay. But I think it's really important to be honest with everybody that the economy is more likely to slow down the amount of inflation we have. But that doesn't mean that it's going to go through a deflationary period. I know nobody wants to hear that, including me. I would like to see prices be less expensive. But you need to do your best to drive forward and find out what solutions there are to actually put it in a better position. So when I graduated college, 4-year degree, expected to get a good job. I moved out to Chicago where my brother was, and I went to go get a job at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. Well, the first job I applied for, I kind of joke about. When I got to the interview, the guy liked me and he's like, "So when could you start?" And I'm like, "I can start tomorrow." He goes, "Okay, great." Well, normally we start people at $5 an hour, but since you have a college degree, we'll give you $5.50. So here I am, a college kid, graduated from a 4-year university, starting my first job at $5.50 an hour. The reason I was okay a bit with that is I knew if I got onto the floor of the exchange, that created opportunity because there were tons of traders making tons of money, and I could be in the position to learn from them. It wasn't about the 550 an hour, it was just putting myself in the position where I knew I had opportunity to grow. Now, before you think, well, but things were so much cheaper back then. Minimum wage was like 4.50 an hour, and a typical lunch was $6 or $8. So you were paying 1.5 times your salary for an hour to be able to buy lunch. Well, at $15 an hour, I think that's pretty reasonable to go to a Subway or to buy a reasonable lunch, and you can afford for less than 1 hour of work to buy lunch. Back then you had to really search to spend less than an hour's time work. And then let's talk about rent. Rents were about 600-800 a month. Well, same thing, from 450, that's about 170, 200 times your pay. Well, at $15 an hour, where I would say the average rent right now is maybe 15 to 1800 a month for a decent apartment in a nice city, you're now talking about 100 to 120 times. Now, there are new expenses that have come around, like a cell phone and things like that, that really, no matter what somebody says, that you may not need, you do need one. But transportation, living, food, it has not gone up at the pace that like people try to say. And $15 an hour, where it seems to be like the pay that they're gravitating to try to make minimum wage, that's a lot more than the 450 was when I was a kid. Again, I know this is going to get a lot of people upset. I know they don't like that, it's frustrating and angry because you feel like you're stuck in the situation. But that's why I say look at the situation you're in and see what could possibly be done to change it. That might be a change in career, a change in direction, looking for somewhere else to go if where you are is in a job that has no upside potential. The only reason I wanted to get to the exchange was to start asking questions and see what I could do to move up. And I would sit there bugging everybody, like, how do I do this? Where do I get to do that? How do I push forward to get out of the 550 an hour? And there were plenty of guys down there who had been runners for 5, 10 years that were still making maybe $6 an hour because that's just what that job paid for. The thing is, they had the same opportunities I did. That you didn't need any type of degree to work down there. You didn't need anything other than to hustle and try to learn about markets. I would go to work at 6 in the morning or 5 in the morning before the sun came up. The markets opened at 7:20, and depending on what my job was, I had to be there an hour or so beforehand. So I'm catching the 5:30 bus to be there by. And then after work, they had all sorts of free classes that would teach you about the markets and things like that. So there were times in the winter when the days were shorter that I never saw the sun because markets would close around 2 o'clock. I'd end up being done around 3 or so, and then class would start around 3:30 and finish around 5:30 or 6. So I'm not saying it as a complaint. I'm saying it as, if you go to work and complain that you don't get paid enough and go home, I would see what maybe you could do to try to change that, to put yourself in a position where you can get into a better spot instead of expecting that the minimum wage should be a higher amount to be able to afford a certain lifestyle. Now, for those of you who went to school to become teachers and things like that and recognize that, oh my God, I'm barely making enough to survive and I got my degree and now I'm using what I got educated in, I'm really sorry. That's a very tough position. But I also recognize, like, I thought I wanted to be a teacher. I never went into that field because I knew it didn't pay enough money, and I was concerned about that going through my education. But I like to teach, which is kind of why I do the YouTube. Even when I was at the exchange, I used to teach the hand signals class to the students who wanted to learn how to do the hand signals. But it was partially because I enjoyed teaching. I get some enjoyment out of that. But in terms of the economy and the markets, what I'm seeing is things that are struggling. It's like really diverging, like a lot of things. The things that bad news is coming out, they're really pushing those things down in terms of stock prices and whatever else. And the things that are doing well are really just shooting up and up and up. So, for me, I see like Archer Daniels Midland, I see 3M, and see Kimberly Clark, right? Kimberly Clark. All three of them had a rough go with their earnings. And I think if you're going to hold them for the next 5 or 10 years, they're good companies and probably a good opportunity. Now, I say this all the time. This is not financial advice. Please don't follow me. You guys need to do your own research for what you think is an important financial decision for you. I'm just a guy on YouTube sharing what works for me. Um, and then I'd be careful about something like Tesla. I feel like it's been overpriced for a long time. And even though I think it may look like a good deal right now, I don't like, really, I don't know. I love Tesla as a company. I think they have a lot of things going for them that differentiate them from other car companies. But I think it could have a long way to go to the downside just to be reasonably priced, unless there's some path for them to be able to earn at a quicker pace than a traditional car company. They're finally mature where I don't picture them growing at the rate they were. So they're going to have to see where they end up in terms of their growth rate of how much money they're able to make as a year over year, and how much they can grow at that. Stocks getting crushed today, which kind of goes to my point of, it's like the things that seem to be having trouble are going through a really tough time. Now, even if I'm right and it's got more room to the downside, I think it'll have big bounces going up on the way down to make it look like, gee, this thing's going to keep rebounding and go right back up to where it was just because so many people love it. But honestly, it's just one I don't really have a strong, like, I don't know. And the way that the price action is, it's not one I want to get involved in. I'm just going to watch it from the sidelines. Um, but again, like, I would just try to look at everyone's own situation and see where you are and what we can do to get in a better spot. I know it looks like, geez, here's this guy who's got everything saying that it's so easy for him. But that isn't always the case, and that wasn't the way it was. I just did what I try to teach people, which is I did my best to make more money, and then I did my best to save as much as possible because I understood that that would put me in the best position to get to where I am and where I want to be. I still create such a habit. I talk about coffee, and it sounds so stupid, but I buy, a thing in Nespresso because I really love coffee. Well, even the pods are expensive. I don't want to buy coffee going out to Starbucks, which I'll do, 3, 4 times a year, maybe, but I can't stomach spending that much for it because I know if I take the pods that I originally bought, throw out the lid, fill it with my own coffee grinds after cleaning it. You can buy these lids on Amazon to put on top that are fit them perfectly to put my own coffee in. I now make the price 20 cents for a cup of coffee. Again, it sounds so silly because what's the difference? But the savings, I think, over time and anywhere you can scrimp and save is what puts you in a better position. Anyway, again, do me a favor, give a thumbs up, hit the like button. By all means, comment, yell at me, tell me I'm wrong and life's not fair. I'm happy to discuss it. I just wish everybody the best, and I hope that you do what you can to get yourself in a great situation. Have a good day.